Inside El Rodeo, Venezuela's deadliest prison riot, secrets the state tried to hide. Hit subscribe before this story disappears, because what you're about to hear is the kind of truth governments lock away, the kind of truth that gets people silenced. Like, comment, share. But know that once you step inside these walls with me, there's no going back. The first gunshots echoed at dawn. Not the sharp pops of warning fire, but the flat, heavy cracks of rifles. Automatic fire rolling across the valley like thunder. From the hilltop outside Guatire, plumes of gray smoke rose above El Rodeo Point, the notorious Venezuelan prison built to hold 750 men, but stuffed with more than 200. By mid-morning, thousands of relatives were massed at the gates, clutching plastic bags of food and water, screaming names into the wind, begging for news. The state television feed showed nothing but the weather and soap operas. Inside the perimeter, chaos was almost organized. Rival gangs, the Prains, as inmate bosses are called, had carved the compound into fiefdoms, stocking arsenals that would shame a militia. Pistols, rifles, grenades, even bulletproof vests had been smuggled in for years through guards and supply trucks. The government had finally moved to retake control after an informant tipped off authorities about a hidden weapons cache in Cell Block 5, but the raid at 5:30 a.m. ignited the powder keg. Captain Andres Ferrer, a National Guard officer with 10 years on riot control, had been ordered to lead the first team inside. He'd been to El Rodeo before, but never like this. Helicopters circling, snipers on rooftops, ambulances lining the road. As his convoy rolled through the gates, stones and homemade explosives rained down from the cell block windows. His radio hissed with overlapping voices, all shouting at once. "Hostiles on the roof! Move left! Watch the stairwell! By the time Ferrer's men reached the main yard, 2 soldiers were down, one clutching a bleeding leg, another dragged to cover after a blast from a pipe bomb. In the chaos, a name kept surfacing on intercepted chatter. El Chino, the prawn who controlled Cell Block 5. He was rumored to have a private armory hidden beneath the chapel. If Ferrer's team could secure him, the siege might end. But no one knew exactly where he was or who he was with. The gang leaders moved like ghosts, blending into crowds of tattooed men with shaved heads and red bandanas. On the outside, journalist Mariana Suarez was trying to piece together what was happening. A local crime reporter for a small Caracas paper, she had spent years covering prison conditions. Her brother had been transferred to El Rodeo months earlier for a minor robbery charge, and she hadn't heard from him since the shooting began. Her press credentials got her past the first cordon, but not the inner gate. There she stood with mothers, wives, and children, notebook in hand, writing down names and fragments of stories between sobs. "We heard explosions. They say the guards are dead. They're killing everyone inside." She noticed a thin man with a neck brace clutching a cell phone, pacing near the wall. He was whispering urgently, shielding the phone with his hand. When he hung up, Mariana approached. "Do you have someone inside?" she asked. He nodded, but didn't give his name. "I work for one of the contractors," he said quietly. "They're not telling you the truth. The government lost control hours ago." By noon, the official narrative was unraveling. State television finally cut to a press conference. The Interior Minister promising the situation was under control. No fatalities, only isolated disturbances. But Mariana's phone was filling with messages from inside. Relatives forwarding voice notes, guards' families, texting in panic. She scribbled everything down. Times, names, descriptions. Something much bigger than a riot was happening. Back inside, Captain Ferrer's unit was pinned down in a corridor lined with religious murals. On the walls, saints' faces were riddled with bullet holes. A megaphone voice boomed from somewhere above. "Retrocedan o mueren! back off or die." Ferrer tried to raise command on the radio, but got only static. His men were running low on tear gas. Then one of his corporals, a young man named Romero, tugged his sleeve. "Captain, listen." Beneath the gunfire, a faint sound. Someone crying. It was coming from a locked utility room off the corridor. Ferrer kicked the door open. Inside, huddled against the far wall, were 3 kitchen workers in blood-stained aprons, hands bound with cable ties. One looked up at Ferrer with wild eyes. "They're moving them through the tunnels," he whispered. "The weapons, the hostages, everything." Tunnels. Ferrer had heard rumors but never seen them. The prison had been built on old quarry land. Some said service tunnels ran under the yards, originally for drainage, but widened over the years by inmates. If the gangs were moving weapons and people underground, the entire operation above ground was meaningless. He radioed the intel to headquarters. This time, a voice answered. Not his commander, but a higher official he'd never spoken to before. "Hold position. Do not pursue. Reinforcements en route." Then the line went dead. Ferrer stared at the handset. Reinforcements had been en route for hours. Outside, Mariana watched an unmarked SUV pull past the barricade, dark-tinted windows glinting. She recognized the license plate prefix, used by the military intelligence agency. 2 men in suits stepped out and walked inside without speaking to anyone. A mother grabbed Mariana's arm. "They're taking bodies out the back," she whispered. "They're hiding them." By late afternoon, gunfire still echoed from deep inside the cell blocks. Smoke from Ning mattresses curled into the sky. Helicopters hovered but did not land. The crowd at the gate had swollen to hundreds, chanting names, prayers, curses. Mariana's phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "If you want to know the truth, meet me at the service road behind the east wall at sunset. Come alone." She hesitated, but then slipped away, following the narrow dirt path lined with trash and stray dogs. Behind the wall, she found a gap in the fence and a maintenance shed. Inside, a guard in a stained uniform sat on an overturned bucket, smoking. He didn't look surprised to see her. "You're the reporter," he said. "I've seen your articles." He exhaled a thin stream of smoke. "They'll say it was a riot. They'll blame the inmates. But you should know. We armed them. We sold them everything. Now they're using it." Mariana's heart pounded. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked. He flicked ash onto the floor. "Because it's already too late." Before she could ask another question, shouting erupted near the gate. A wave of relatives surged forward, some breaking through the first barrier. Guards raised shields. Tear gas canisters arced through the air. Mariana ran back toward the commotion, covering her face. Through the haze, she saw 2 stretchers being carried out of a side door. Sheets covered the bodies, but blood soaked through. The crowd screamed. Inside the prison, Ferrer and his men had managed to push toward the chapel. The door was barricaded. As they prepared to breach, Romero pointed to a dark stain seeping from under the door. Ferrer kicked it open and stopped cold. The chapel had been turned into an armory. Racks of rifles lined the walls, grenades in crates, tactical vests, and in the center, a trapdoor standing open, a ladder descending into darkness. On the altar, a notebook lay open, pages covered in names and numbers. Ferrer flipped through. It was a ledger, payments, shipments, codes, not just inmates' names but officials, politicians, police commanders. Proof that El Rodeo wasn't just a prison, but a hub in a nationwide network. A noise below made him snap the book shut. Footsteps, many of them, moving fast. He signaled his men to hold fire, then peered down the ladder. Flickering light glowed far below. Voices rose. Spanish, quick and urgent. He recognized one. El Chino. "Move the ledger," the voice commanded. "Nothing leaves here." Ferrer looked at Romero. "We can't let them take it." But before they could move, a grenade rolled out from the darkness and clinked onto the chapel floor. "Cúbranse!" Ferrer shouted. The explosion ripped through the room, flinging splinters of wood and stone. Ferrer was thrown against the wall, ears ringing. Smoke filled the chapel. Through the haze, he saw the trapdoor slam shut. The ledger was gone. Outside, Mariana wiped tear gas from her eyes. Her phone buzzed again. "They're moving the proof. If you want it, follow the tunnel." Attached was a crude map of the prison's underground layout. She stared at the screen. Her brother's name was on the list Ferrer had seen. She didn't know it yet, but she was about to cross from journalist to participant. As night fell over El Rodeo, gunfire continued in bursts. Helicopters switched off their spotlights. The crowd at the gate refused to leave. And beneath the chapel, a secret passage carried men and evidence into the dark. When Mariana reached the maintenance shed again, the guard who had spoken to her was gone. The bucket was overturned. On the wall, scrawled in chalk, were 3 words: "No hay salida." There is no exit. She pocketed her phone, heart hammering. Above the prison, the first stars appeared. In the distance, a low rumble. Not thunder, but vehicles approaching. She realized the government was about to seal the area completely. If she wanted answers, she had only one chance: go inside. She stepped toward the fence gap, walked under the wire, and disappeared into the shadows of El Rodeo. And that's when the shooting started again, closer than before, followed by a scream she recognized. Her brother's voice. The smell hit her first. Sweat, cordite, damp concrete, and something metallic like old pennies. Mariana crouched low in the shadow of the maintenance shed, clutching her phone like a talisman. The crude map still glowed on the screen, showing a line that snaked under the chapel and out toward the east wall. She could hear boots pounding and orders barked in Spanish, but she couldn't tell if they belonged to guards or gang members. Here, the uniforms meant nothing. She thought of her brother's voice, that brief scream across the din, and it propelled her forward. Ducking under the sagging fence, she dropped into the outer service ditch and followed it until she reached a rusted grate. It covered a drain opening just big enough for her to squeeze through. She pried at it with both hands until the bolts gave and crawled inside. The tunnel was barely lit, a ribbed cylinder of concrete descending at a slight angle. The air was wet and cold. Far ahead, a flashlight flickered, then vanished. She moved toward it, palms scraping on damp walls, heart hammering. Her notebook fell from her pocket, pages scattering in the grime, but she didn't stop. Above ground, Captain Ferrer staggered to his feet in the chapel, ears still ringing from the explosion. 2 of his men lay stunned but alive. Smoke curled from a crater where the grenade had landed. The trapdoor was sealed now, a heavy steel plate bolted from below. The ledger was gone. "We're blind," Romero coughed, wiping blood from his forehead. Ferrer pressed his radio, but only static hissed back. He glanced at the saints' faces on the bullet-riddled walls and felt a surge of fury. "We're not done," he said. While his men regrouped, Aaron noticed something glinting near the altar. A silver pen with an insignia. Not an inmate's pen. A government agency crest etched into the barrel. Someone from the outside had been here. He pocketed it, sensing it might matter later. Mariana emerged into a wider chamber lined with pipes. The floor sloped toward a pool of stagnant water. Voices echoed from deeper within, men speaking in low tones, punctuated by the metallic clink of weapons. She pressed herself against the wall and inched forward until she could see. Below a dangling bulb, a group of prisoners in makeshift uniforms moved crates onto a handcart. Inside the open crate nearest to her, Rifle barrels gleamed. Another prisoner held a sat phone, murmuring into it in code. And at the center, back turned to her, stood a heavy-set man with a shaved head and a gold chain. El Chino. Beside him, hooded, hands bound, was a young man in a torn prison shirt. Mariana's breath caught. Even through the bruises, she recognized her brother. El Chino gestured to two of his men, who began leading the captive toward another tunnel. Mariana's heart pounded. She had no plan, no weapon, only her phone. She raised it and snapped a photo. The shutter click was faint, but El Chino's head twitched. He turned halfway, eyes scanning the shadows. Mariana ducked back, heart in her throat. Back in the chapel, Ferrer pried at the trapdoor with a crowbar until the edge bent enough to slip a flashlight beam through. A ladder disappeared into darkness. "We can't go blind," Romero said. Ferrer nodded. "Then we go with our eyes open." He slung his rifle and started down. Romero behind him, two more men covering. The ladder led to the same service tunnels Mariana had entered. Their boots splashed in shallow water as they advanced, beams of light cutting through the damp gloom. The tunnel branched. Echoes masked the direction of movement. Ferrer paused, listening. Faint voices ahead. Spanish. Urgent. He motioned his men forward. Mariana pressed herself into a niche as El Chino's group passed. Her brother stumbled. Wrists bound. She wanted to call out, but bit her lip until she tasted blood. She watched as they disappeared into a side corridor. She waited until their footsteps faded, then crept after them, snapping photos of every crate she passed. Above ground, the government cordon tightened. Armored trucks sealed the road, and officials in suits conferred with soldiers under a hastily erected tent. Helicopter rotors thumped overhead, but still no extraction team entered the prison. Families at the gate screamed, some throwing rocks at the line of shields. Mariana's colleague back at the paper tried calling her, but got only voicemail. In the tunnel, Ferrer's flashlight beam swept over something on the ground. A torn page from a notebook. He picked it up. Written in hurried handwriting. "They're moving him." It wasn't one of his men's. At the bottom, a phone number. He pocketed it. Romero's voice cut through the darkness. "Captain, look!" Up ahead, a faint glow. Another chamber. They crept forward. The chamber opened into a larger space. Concrete walls blackened with soot. More crates stacked to the ceiling. Maps tacked to the walls. In the center, a wooden table covered with folders, cash, and weapons. But no people. Only a single door at the far end swinging shut. Ferrer crossed the room, grabbed one folder at random. Inside were documents stamped with official seals. Shipping manifests, prison transfer orders, signatures. He scanned a page and felt his stomach drop. Names of senior officials matched with cartel payments. The corruption wasn't local. It went all the way up. A shout echoed from the corridor. Boots pounded. Ferrer signaled his men to cover. The door burst open. But instead of prisoners, two men in black tactical gear entered, faces masked, rifles raised. They weren't his men. They weren't inmates. They were something else. Mariana, farther down the tunnel, heard the gunfire erupt. She ducked behind a pipe as echoes thundered through the concrete. Her brother stumbled, fell to his knees. One of El Chino's men yanked him up, shouting. She crawled closer. She felt a chill. "Whose is it?" He didn't answer. The spotlight passed once, twice, then fixed on the grate. The beam pinned them in blinding white light. A voice boomed from a loudspeaker above, calm and cold. "Stay where you are. We're coming down." Ferrer raised his rifle. "That's not the army," he muttered. Mariana clutched the ladder, heart hammering. She realized whoever was in that helicopter already knew exactly where they were. The grate screeched as it began to lift from above. And in that moment she understood. The real power behind El Rodeo wasn't the gangs or the guards. It was whoever was coming down that ladder now. The grate clanged open like a trap. Cold night air and rotor wash blasted into the shaft, whipping dust into their faces. Ferrer shielded his eyes as a figure descended the ladder from the helicopter. Black jumpsuit, visor down, no insignia. Another followed. Then another, boots clanging on the metal rungs. Their weapons were sleek and foreign, not National Guard issue. "Hands where we can see them," the first man ordered in a flat accent. "Step away from the ladder." Ferrer lifted his rifle but didn't lower it. "Who are you?" he shouted over the rotor noise. No answer. The second man reached into a pouch and produced zip ties. Mariana pressed herself against the wall. She had expected cartel gunmen or rogue guards. Instead, these were something else. Mercenaries, contractors, ghosts. She glanced at Ferrer, saw the flicker of calculation in his eyes. If they let themselves be taken, the ledger would vanish, and her brother would be gone forever. The first man moved toward Ferrer. "Now," he barked. "Weapon on the ground." Ferrer met Mariana's eyes. "Run," he whispered. Before she could react, he swung his rifle up and fired 3 quick bursts at the ceiling, showering sparks and concrete. The mercenaries ducked, shouting, "Fade!" Ferrer grabbed Mariana's arm and pulled her down a side pipe passage, barely wide enough for one person. Romero stumbled after them, clutching his bleeding arm. Behind, bootsteps pounded, flashlights slicing through the dust. The pipe twisted and dipped, leading them into a low crawl space. Ferrer's flashlight picked out graffiti on the walls, arrows and symbols left by inmates who had used the tunnels for years. He followed the markings, hoping they still meant what they used to. Above, the helicopter's noise receded, then rose again. Someone shouted orders through a radio, echoing down the pipes. They emerged into a small maintenance chamber with a rusty ladder leading up to a hatch. Ferrer climbed first, eased the hatch open a crack. Beyond lay the outer exercise yard, now deserted, floodlights off, shadows stretching long. He motioned them up. One by one they climbed out, crouching low. On the far side of the yard, trucks idled near a service gate. El Chino stood by the rear truck, still holding Mariana's brother by the collar. A man in a suit stood next to him. The same man Ferrer had glimpsed in the chapel, now bareheaded, his government crest pin gleaming in the dim light. Papers changed hands. Money. Orders. Proof that the state's own officials were orchestrating the siege. Mariana's breath caught. She raised Ferrer's spare phone and zoomed in, recording. For a moment she forgot the danger, focusing on the screen, framing the faces. The man in the suit turned, and in the glow of a cigarette she saw his face clearly. The deputy minister who had fronted the morning press conference, assuring the nation everything was under control. Ferrer hissed. "We get your brother first," he whispered. "Then we get out." They crept along the edge of the yard toward a stack of crates. From here, Ferrer had a clear line of fire, but too many hostiles between. Romero, pale, but steady, pulled a small flashbang from his vest. "One shot," he said. Ferrer nodded. "On 3. They counted silently. Romero lobbed the flashbang high. It clattered on the pavement between the trucks. A white-hot burst of light and sound shattered the night. Men shouted, blinded. Ferrer broke cover, sprinting toward the truck. Mariana followed without thinking. El Chino spun, dragging the hostage toward the cab. Ferrer slammed into him, knocking the pistol from his hand. They grappled, boots skidding on concrete. Mariana's brother fell to his knees, wrists still bound. Mariana cut at the plastic ties with a shard of metal she'd grabbed from the tunnel. They snapped. "Run!" she shouted. But El Chino wasn't finished. He lunged at Ferrer with a knife, slashing his sleeve. Ferrer twisted, driving his shoulder into the man's chest, sending them both crashing against the truck. The deputy minister had vanished into the dark. Mariana dragged her brother toward the yard's open gate. Romero covered them, firing short bursts to keep the mercenaries back. Bullets sparked off the truck's body. Ferrer landed a punch that sent El Chino reeling, then grabbed his rifle and leveled it at him. For a moment, everything froze. The two men, breath steaming in the night. "Who are you working for?" Ferrer demanded. El Chino smiled through split lips. "The same people you are," he said. "You just don't know it yet." Before Ferrer could respond, a single shot cracked from the shadows. El Chino jerked, a red bloom spreading across his chest, and collapsed. Ferrer spun, but the shooter was already gone, the man in the suit, melting into the night as the trucks roared out of the gate. Sirens wailed beyond the perimeter. Real reinforcements at last, or another layer of the same lie. Ferrer turned to Mariana and her brother. "We have to move now," he said. They sprinted across the yard toward a side door leading to the administrative wing. Inside, offices were abandoned, papers strewn as if everyone had fled. Ferrer led them up a stairways, to a balcony overlooking the main entrance. Below, soldiers in standard National Guard uniforms were finally pouring in, securing corridors, shouting orders. The mercenaries had vanished with the trucks. Mariana handed Ferrer the phone. "I got it," she said, breathless. "Faces, voices, the deputy minister." Ferrer nodded grimly. "Guard it with your life. It's the only thing that will survive this." An officer below spotted Ferrer and shouted. Guns lifted. Ferrer raised his badge and barked orders back. For a moment it seemed they might be recognized. But then another voice, cold, authoritative, cut through. "Detain them." The soldiers began climbing the stairs. "They're not here to save us," Ferrer muttered. "We're the loose ends." He ushered Mariana and her brother toward a back door leading to the rooftop. From there, a maintenance ladder ran down the outer wall to the ravine. They scrambled up, emerging into the open air. The city lights glittered far off beyond the hills. Below, more trucks were arriving. The siege would be declared resolved by morning. Official numbers would be released. A handful of dead, weapons seized, order restored. The real story would be buried with the bodies. At the edge of the roof, Ferrer paused. "I can hold them off," he said. "You go." Mariana grabbed his arm. "We're not leaving you." He looked at her brother, then at her. "If I go with you, none of us makes it. You have the proof. Get it out." For a heartbeat they stood there in the wind. Then Ferrer pressed the folder from his vest into her hands, the one page he had saved from the ledger. Names, accounts, codes. "Take this," he said. "Tell the truth." Footsteps thundered up the stairwell, voices shouting. Ferrer turned back toward the door, rifle raised. Mariana's brother gripped her hand. "We have to go," he said. She nodded, tears cutting tracks through the young, dust on her face. "Thank you," she whispered. Ferrer gave a tight smile. "Get it to someone who still believes in the law," he said. "If you can find one." Then he stepped back into the stairwell as the first soldiers emerged, drawing fire away from them. Mariana and her brother climbed over the edge of the roof onto the ladder, descending into the ravine. Shots echoed above, then silence. They ran through scrub and rocks until the prison lights were only aglow behind them. At last, they reached a dirt road where a single car idled. An old taxi. The driver rolled down the window. "You Mariana?" he asked. "Friend of Diego? Get in." They tumbled into the back seat. The driver sped off without headlights, winding through back roads until the city lights rose ahead. Mariana clutched the phone and the folder to her chest. Her brother stared out the window, silent. In the distance, sirens wailed and helicopters circled. The state would announce victory. Families would be told their sons were relocated. Official reports would list contraband seized, but not mention the crates, the tunnels, the men in suits. She opened the folder and scanned the page. Names, dates, payments. Enough to topple ministers. maybe even the president. But only if she could get it out before it vanished like all the other evidence. Her brother finally spoke. "They'll come after you," he said. She met his eyes. "They already are." The taxi crossed a bridge, leaving the prison valley behind. Mariana's phone buzzed. A new message from an unknown number. "You have what we want. If you want to live, hand it over. No signature." She stared at the screen, then at the dark road ahead. In her lap lay the proof of a state within a state. Next to her sat the brother she'd almost lost. Somewhere behind them, Captain Ferrer was either dead or about to become another missing officer. She closed her eyes. This story had started as a report. Now it was her life. When she opened them, she spoke not to her brother but to the empty night beyond the window. "They think this ends tonight," she whispered. "It doesn't." And as the taxi sped toward the city, a lone helicopter peeled away from the prison and began to follow, its running lights off, a dark shadow in the Venezuelan sky.